Studio Ghibli. They're my favorite film studio and my favorite anything, really, when it comes to art, and I love them a whole bunch. I don't think they've made an outright bad movie, and they've made so many good movies that you should definitely check these out if you haven't seen them. But anyhow, this video is going to be really long, so let's jump right into it. Earwig and the Witch is Studio Ghibli's latest movie, and it's definitely the black sheep of the bunch. This movie wasn't for me, and it obviously wasn't supposed to be. This, more than all the others, felt like it was clearly made for tiny little children, not dudes on YouTube, and that's completely okay. I'm not gonna go in on something that I think intentionally wasn't made for me. The only thing I will say is that it is sad that the studio departed from its legendary 2D animation. Ocean Waves is the most boring movie on this list. It does the slice of life thing that I usually like, but in my opinion, I never felt that trademark magic that so many other films from the studio have. I lost interest in the first 5 minutes and never felt fully on board. Porco Rosso was a movie I really wanted to like, but this just wasn't my thing either. And I thought it definitely would be, though. I seriously think it's because the main character is an adult pig and not a coming-of-age child. Like, call me crazy, but I think adolescence is a key ingredient for these movies, and this, similar to Ocean Waves, gave me nothing in terms of emotion. It's chill, and I can see how people enjoy this, but I just didn't. There's a lot I like, and it definitely does have more charm than the others I've listed before, but I think the bar is just so high that after I watched this, I felt like I watched someone trying to mimic the studio. And that definitely sounds a little mean, but I think it's kind of accurate. I think when it comes to Goro Miyazaki, he understands the templates to stories really well, but I haven't been hooked by any of the characters in his films. This movie is definitely still worth checking out, though, even if it's only to form your own opinion on the romance. What a weird movie. I think a valid compliment of this is how much it seems like something a kid would write, and I'm assuming that's kind of the point. It's directly based off a book that the character Shizuku wrote in Whisper of the Heart, and I think that's a pretty cool idea. I've seen this a few times, and I've enjoyed it more and more each time. It's just a fun movie. But speaking of weird movies, wow, I'm not sure if I can even show clips from this because of how these characters are animated, but beneath all the strangeness, there's actually a really good environmentalist message here, and if you haven't seen this, don't look up what I'm referring to and just go in blind. I promise you've never seen a kids movie make the stylistic choices this one did. Pretty low, I know, but similar to Earwig in the sense that I am clearly not the target audience. It's well made, deserves the acclaim, I understand why people enjoy this, but ultimately, this movie never clicks with me the way it does for others. It's cute, but I get bored every single time I watch it. Even if I wasn't trying to speedrun these lower movies in this video, I still wouldn't have much more to say about this. Although it is pretty awesome that it came out the same year as Grave of the Fireflies, that was a really cool choice by the studio. This might be Ghibli's most melodramatic movie, and I have mixed feelings about it. On one hand, I'm a sucker for small-scale romances, I think that's what this is. And it's definitely delivered on that like summer love kind of story. It's overflowing with nostalgia and vulnerability, and I did enjoy that. The two leads have pretty good chemistry, and I do like how the film ended, but on the other hand, I just wasn't hit by this one the way I was some others. It's still pretty good though, and you should watch it. But more importantly, this is one of 3 movies they could have ended on, but decided not to. Que sera sera, whatever will be, will be. I really liked this. This felt so American. Like, it felt like I was watching The Simpsons or Malcolm in the Middle or something like that. And I'm assuming that's why they got the one, the only, according to Jim himself, Jim Belushi, to voice act as the dad. I lost it as soon as he started talking. But speaking of voice acting, Tress MacNeille was fantastic in this movie. She stole every single scene, was the clear heart of this really good family comedy, and I can't believe it took me this long to watch this one. Absolutely adorable. Ponyo is approaching Paddington levels of cuteness. And despite being one of the films made for tiny kids, this one did click with me quite a bit. And it's because of the two lead characters. They're so sweet, and their silliness blends in perfectly with the insane, colorful, and almost psychedelic interpretation of the ocean. This movie is very strange, but I absolutely love it. It has that magic that I keep talking about, and I'm about to talk about even more. Amazing movie. Perfect movie, even. The story is unbearably good. There aren't many non-horror movies that hit this heavy. I applaud everyone involved for just really going for it and not pulling any punches whatsoever. And obviously I'm trying to be as cryptic as possible if you haven't seen it. This might be the movie I would recommend knowing nothing about the most, if that makes sense. That's how I watched it, and it made the impact so much greater. However, I've only seen this once and have almost no desire to rewatch it. The hottest take on this whole list. People hate this movie. Famously, Goro's own father, my favorite director in the heart of the studio, Hayao Miyazaki, walked out of this movie. Which is an absolutely terrible thing to do, so what a great guy, woohoo. But nevertheless, I personally really enjoy this and always have. I agree that it's not a perfectly constructed story and some of the character development feels rushed and unfocused, but I really don't care about that. Story and characters are only elements to movies, albeit pretty large ones, but they don't have to be perfect for a movie to be enjoyable. What works for me with Tales from Earthsea is everything else. I love the animation style. Some of these landscapes of nature are breathtaking. I really enjoy the score. There's a song that's sung about halfway through the movie that I think is gorgeous. I think the bits of action are really entertaining. I like the character designs quite a bit. And ultimately, this movie reminds me of a D&D campaign. Like I said earlier, Goro gets templates and ideas right, but I think he doesn't always develop them the best. And that's how D&D tends to go. Every character feels archetypal and derivative. The main story might be a bit bland, and that big bad wizard might just be a big bad wizard. But if it's played by Willem Dafoe, who cares? I will always defend this movie. Grow up and learn to let yourself like it. I think this movie is fairly underrated as well. It seems like most people have this in their bottom third-ish of their rankings, and I get that, but I definitely disagree. It just does everything really well for me. I think it touches on adolescence in an interesting way with these two leads, especially Arrietty, who's a pretty underappreciated character in my opinion. She has a huge sense of wonder and adventure that keeps the plot moving and makes this whole movie kind of work. And every time she goes out to explore by herself, it actually creates some really great tension. And as much as I praise Ghibli, they don't always utilize suspense as much as they do other emotions, so getting a good amount of that here was a great addition. I think this movie also builds its world ingeniously. Fitting a whole world inside a home requires a lot of imagination and inherently lends itself to the playful nature that Ghibli tends to have in their best movies. And from start to finish, I'm always hooked with this one. And speaking of things Ghibli doesn't always do, this movie has such a great sci-fi feel to it. The obvious comparison is Mononoke, and for good reason. The huge environmentalist message, the iconic female heroine, the themes of nature and technology, the big battle towards the end, all that. But I also felt a bit of 2049, some Children of Men, and even Fury Road vibes here. It's a post-apocalyptic world that feels like there's danger around every corner. And I love the imagination that went into the art style here too. Beyond the environment having a very unique presence to it, Nausicaa herself is easily one of the most well-designed and well-developed characters in any of these movies. She's honestly just really, really cool. She gets so many moments to shine and fight and fly around on her glider, which is super dope. This is one of the only true action heroes the studio has ever had, and I would love to see them go in this direction again. This one has grown on me a lot. I used to think it was a little cliche in its storytelling, and especially with the Ethereum Crystal MacGuffin, but in rewatching it more and more, I've actually come to enjoy it a lot. It's just a really great and well-paced adventure film that touches on almost every big Ghibli theme: nature and technology, fantasy worlds, the magic of flying, two young leads, and basically everything you'd expect from them, but in an extremely engaging way. And the two leads have some great chemistry and get so much time on screen. I really love Pazu. He's basically just a good dude, you know? Real salt of the earth kind of guy, but he has a ton of personality too. Him and Cheetah both. I was afraid that a quote like good guy in a royal princess character would feel a bit hollow, but they never did. And of course, Mark Hamill was an S tier voice acting choice. Probably the most relatable movie for me on this list. The same age as Taiko. I'm also single and choose not to have kids. I've lived in the same place forever. I prefer cloudy days to sunny days. I'll always eat someone's food if they don't want it. I'm a little awkward. I reflect on the past nonstop. And I'm not sure how much I've changed since the 5th grade either. There were a few movies on this list I had to watch for this video, and I intentionally saved this one for last because I heard it was really, really good, and yeah, I'm in love with it now. If I had seen it more than once or had more time to really let it settle in, I may have gone even higher with it. I really don't have any complaints about this at all, and it's definitely a new personal favorite. Easily the best relationship in any of these movies, and that's probably because it's between two well-developed adults, not children, which is a reason that this is one of the most mature Ghibli films to date. I think it explores ambition in a really interesting way as well, showing what following a dream can look like, focusing on the impossible compromises artists have to make so often in their careers. When it comes down to it, do you make art that matters or art that sells? Which is kind of how this ties back to being a quote war film, but like so many Miyazaki movies, the presence of the war mostly only exists in the background. In the forefront is a film concerned with beauty, the beauty in young love and the beauty in aviation. This, more than most, felt like a real passion project for Miyazaki, and it would still be the perfect film for him to end his career with. This is definitely one of the funniest movies on this list. I laughed so hard throughout this movie, mostly from Sophie and Calcifer. And speaking of which, Calcifer is a textbook example of a perfect side character. He plays an important role in regards to the plot, he's cherished every time he's on screen, and he develops over time. This is also visually probably the most beautiful of the Ghibli films. I know that's a bit of a hot take, but honestly, the hand-drawn animation is some of the best I have ever seen. It's overflowing with color and lush nature and little fine details. Some of the landscapes in this film are so realistic, and the third act is just pure excitement. The final 20-ish minutes of this movie might be the most emotionally thrilling and flat-out entertaining sequences in any of these movies. This is so funny, so romantic, has a great sense of adventure, it's perfectly animated, and all around just a really, really good time. Probably the cutest movie on this list, with some of the lowest stakes. And I love that about it. Kiki's just a young kid trying to find their place in the world and how they fit in. Which is why I love that she's a witch. Her ability to fly is the skill that she tries to hone in on the most to just survive and make a living. And even though that's definitely the route she should go, nothing about it is easy. She works really hard, has a fantastic attitude, but everything goes wrong all the time. And it seems like every time she starts to feel proud of something she's done, some real life obstacle is in her way to give her that little bit of a everyday depression and defeat that so many people feel in real life. Even if the obstacle is just something like expensive groceries or messing up at work, running late, and stuff like that. It's a pretty unique atmosphere for Ghibli. They don't often explore the malaise of working class people in their movies, but it's a great idea here. Don't get me wrong though, there's still so many awesome supporting characters and fun, silly moments that keep Kiki from being too discouraged. At the end of the day, it's a story about good people just doing good things. This is probably their most well-made movie. Beyond the watercolor animation style, which is mesmerizing and unlike anything I've ever seen on this scale, thematically, I don't know any film, Ghibli or not, exploring these particular themes in a more cathartic way. What I mean is that this movie is really, really emotional. It shows the importance of a simple life, cherishing memories, and spending time with the people we love by showing the tragedy of not doing those things. The tragedy of overcomplicating life and how that ultimately robs us of what we care about most. And throughout the film, we watch our main character be robbed of all the free will in their own life. They never get to choose what path they'll take, and when her anger and her sadness hits its boiling point, we want so desperately for her to break free. If you haven't seen this one, you have to watch it. The sheer optimism of this movie kills me. This is so sweet. Like, no shade, but I feel like the praise Totoro gets for just being pure and innocent and the studio at their most wholesome is actually more fitting for this film. This is Ghibli doing the slice of life thing better than they ever have. There is, and I mean this so literally, no conflict whatsoever. The stakes are actually just whether or not this kid is going to get into a good school, write her book, and like maybe fall in love. And of course, every time I watch this movie, I block out all of reality and root for her to follow her dreams, man. Ghibli can talk about fantasy worlds and war in their other movies. This one is just about a kid's life. A little bit of insight into a protagonist that is impossible to root against. I've seen this movie at least 10 times, maybe more. Probably way more, now that I think about it. In the past week alone, I've watched it like 3 times. I've been binging a ton of Ghibli movies for this list. I just keep rewatching this because it's so sick. I love the small scale, no conflict, personal, introspective, slice of life, coming of age Ghibli movies to pieces. It's why I made this video. It's why I think they're the best collection of movies of all time. But this is something else. Mononoke is amazing. This is so epic. They hinted at this scope in terms of action before in something like Nausicaa, but never quite like this. This is their best showing and their best critique of war. This is their most mature and complex view on the conflicts between nature and technology. This is their most in-depth and poetic take on hatred and vengeance. And this movie achieves all that while being remarkably unjudgmental. At least in a way. What I mean is that all the groups in this story have some decent argument as to why they're justified in their positions. It's all intentionally very fuzzy, as is life. However, I do applaud this film for never shying away from its core anti-war environmentalist message. To keep it simple, its message is basically this: if humans upset the balance of nature, it'll be at their own peril. So we have to find some way to live in harmony. It's the only way any of us make it out. But of course, to no one's surprise, it's Spirited Away at number 1. And I'm glad everything's already been said about this movie, because I've always had such a hard time talking about it for whatever reason. There's a tone to this that is impossible for me to describe. I've written about it before, but even in that review, I failed to fully articulate what is so special about this to me. I guess it's like a piece of music in that way. Sometimes when a song is so emotional, you just can't put into words what you're feeling, even if the emotion itself is having such a clear and profound impact on you. But if someone were to ask you what you felt, you'd only be able to sit there, close your eyes, re-immerse yourself into that feeling, and fail to give them an answer. And that's how I feel. The only way I can visualize this is as this shimmering, spinning ball of white light that acts as the nucleus for all other Ghibli films. I've mentioned Ghibli's magic a few times in this video, and this movie is the best example of that indescribable, powerful, pure magic. It's one of those movies that changes people. This really is the heart of the studio, and obviously one of the best movies ever made. Ranking is a hard and pretty pointless thing to do. Like, depending on when you ask me, this list could be a lot different, and truth be told, I tend to prefer a good tier list instead, so bam. You can pause the video, view this for a bit if you want, but anyhow, back to me talking. These movies mean so much to so many people, myself included, and I think they're great for many reasons. The 2D animation is iconic and entrancing. There's so much attention to detail in basically all of these movies. The worlds are full of terror and magic and beauty. The textures are rich, the colors are vivid, the characters' demeanors and how they emote seem so subtle and intentional. The main characters themselves are almost always three-dimensional, well-developed, interesting people that I can watch all day. Whether they're baking bread, reading a book, talking to an animal, fighting in a war, it doesn't matter. These movies entrance me in a way that almost any plot seems wildly entertaining. And most importantly, Studio Ghibli tackles big ideas. It would seem to me that many of the people involved in making these films are a bit cynical and have some real doubts about humanity's future, and have a lot to say about the human condition. And I think because of that, they have a keen appreciation for sacred things, like the necessary balance between humans and their environment. They seem to understand how important it is to cherish the purity and lack of corruption in children, while also reminding us, the audience, to not underestimate the power of imagination and hope and childhood. These are the best movies I have ever seen, and I genuinely think the world and entertainment is a better place because of Studio Ghibli.